Please go on mute. Our message today, the title anyway, the Haylel You Don't Say. The Haylel You Don't Say. That was a very veiled allusion to a name that we misunderstood from a couple of years ago. I did some digging into it, and that's the real name of a certain character from this book. The Bible has been one book that has been around for thousands of years, and it has been translated and mistranslated so many times that many have finally reduced it in their minds to something that is only read in English only, and only have taken a lot of the truth by this out of the book by doing it this way. And this has played right into Satan's hands and has made his job of fooling us much easier. For those among us that have these high minds of themselves, and they bring things up to us that we're not supposed to know about anyway. But anybody that can read can learn these things over time. But this is added our favorite pastime into the plan of God, and it shouldn't be there. This jingoism shouldn't be there. A plan that many will follow because of this little addition to the biblical narrative. This story, like much of the Bible, starts with the story of the creation of the earth. This story is a little here and there, as most of the Bible is. I alluded to it last week in the story of Job. But the things that set off a psychopath don't always attract the attention of a normally adjusted person. Most of us didn't catch it last week. This didn't set any of us off. This is good. It means that there are no psychopaths here. That's always a good thing. But there are so many out there. But this was a normal thing that happened when Yahweh Elohim did something in the cosmos. His host of angels erupted in praise. Starting off with Job, the 38th chapter, the 7th verse. Job, the 38th chapter, the 7th verse. When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of Elohim shouted for joy. Presumably, among these morning stars and sons of Elohim, using poetic language here for angels, was Hasatan or Haylel. In Hebrew, this word means H196, the light bringer or the shining one. But the more familiar name to us is Hasatan, or Satan. And this story is fascinating from all angles. But also, it will end sadly for him if he continues down this path of pathology. This is the story of a villain, plain and simple. Many don't see it this clearly, but nowadays, in all of this sympathy for the bad guy, the Rolling Stones, I think, first talked about it with their sympathy for the devil years ago. But when this story is plainly told, and it will be plainly told, plainly, this is not a story of someone who got shafted in business and was dealt some ungodly wrong turn, or some backstory of sadness and hymns and all of that. No, this was all his own fault, his doing, and it is still within his control to end this story and end it less tragically than it will end if these events continue as they have until now. But this story will answer two questions that we have been asking for a long time. One, why is this world in such a mess? Why is this world in such a mess? And two, what we can do about it. Our title again, the Haylel You Don't Say. You don't say. Haylel started well. He started very well. This is what Yahweh Elohim said about him from the start. Isaiah, the 14th chapter, the 12th verse. How are you fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, or Haylel? If you can't find the word in your Bibles, the H1966 is the Strong's number. H196. How are you fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How are you cut down to the ground, who didst claim the Gentiles as an inheritance? You who said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven, upon high, next to the stars of Yahweh. I will exalt my throne, and I will sit upon the mount of the testimony, and in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. You think. Continuing in Ezekiel, the 28th chapter, the 11th verse. And the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Son of man, lift up a lament over the king of Tyre, and say to him, so says Yahweh Elohim, you seal the measure, full of wisdom. Ezekiel, the 28th chapter, the 11th verse. You seal the measure, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You have been in Eden, the garden of Yahweh. Every precious stone was your covering. The ruby, the topaz, and the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, and the jasper, the sapphire, the turquoise, and the emerald, and gold. The workmanship of your tambourines and of your flutes was prepared in you in the day that you were created. They don't say much of it in the Bible, but he was a master musician as well. Led the choir at some point of angels. 14. You were the anointed cherub that covers, and I had to put you in the holy height of Yahweh where you were. You have walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. You were perfect in your ways from the day that you were created. Note that this is a created being. It can be destroyed. You were perfect in your ways from the day you were created until iniquity was found in you. By the multitude of your goods, so to speak, have filled your midst with violence, and you have sinned. So I cast you profaned from the height of Yahweh, and I destroy you, O covering cherub from among the stones of fire. This being was made by Yahweh to be perfect, flawless, perfect in every way. He was the anointed cherub that covers. We haven't covered much of this, but you are the anointed cherub. I would rather keep the words in the original Hebrew. You are a cherub, anointed, a protector, or one who covers for defense. For your wisdom, power, and excellency, like a cherub or angel, for the sacredness of your person and office. As the anointed of Yahweh, for the exercise of your power and office, as a shield or a protector of the weak. He didn't have much of a job at all. Yahweh is anything but weak. This was a ceremonial position as much as anything. And that means to me, he had an idle mind. You get into this deeply enough, you'll figure some things out for yourself. He was appointed to protect Yahweh. A ceremonial position, surely. If anyone has seen the cherubs atop the Ark of the Covenant, this was Haylel's position. A largely ceremonial position. Surely the strongest, powerful being in the universe could easily protect himself. Again, this was largely a ceremonial position. You've seen this before. You spend any amount of time around the power brokers of this world, you suddenly start to think of yourself as one of them. You start to think of yourself as so from the same class that they are. Isaiah 14, the 12th verse again. I repeat these for a reason. We will figure out that reason as we go along. Isaiah, the 14th chapter, the 12th verse. How you are fallen from the heavens, O shining star, son of the morning. How you are cut down to the ground, you who weakened the nations. For you have said in your heart, I will go up to the heavens. I will exalt my throne above the stars of Yahweh. You start to think like power brokers as you associate yourself with power brokers. I've seen people that had these jobs, and the people that they worked around had maids and stuff, and they would go around talking about they had maids and stuff like they did. 14, I will go up above the clouds, the height of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Yet you shall be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. This angel, Haylel, Lucifer, the light bringer, the symbol of perfection, had gone rogue. Had gone rogue. He had become so wrapped up in himself, so proud of what he was, that he convinced himself that he was more qualified to lead than Yahweh Elohim, who made him a created being. Anything that Yahweh Elohim can create, he can eliminate from creation. More of that later on in this very sad story. Continuing on, Revelation, the 12th chapter, the 3rd verse. Revelation, the 12th chapter, the 3rd verse. And another sign was seen in the heavens. And behold, a red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns on his heads. And his tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven and cast them onto the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman being about to bear, so that when she bears, he might devour her child. And she bore a son, a male. Even back then, he knew what was going to come in the 21st century. And he was very specific about every sex he encountered and created in this Bible. And she bore a son, a male, who is going to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared by Elohim Yahweh, so that they might nourish her there 1,260 days. Roughly a year and a half, 3 years and a half. Satan, or Haylel's fall from heaven is symbolically described again in Isaiah, the 14th chapter, starting at the 12th verse. How you have fallen from the heavens, O Haylel, son of the morning. Satan, you have. You have cut down. You have been cut down to the ground. You who laid low the nations. For you have said in your heart, let me go up to the heavens. Let me raise my throne above the stars of Elohim. And let me sit in the mount of the appointment of the sides of the north. 14. Let me go up above the heights of the clouds. Let me be like the Most High. Even among friends, notice that person that places too many I's in their sentences. Notice that person. Note them well. That's a person that's a little bit too full of themselves. I was once that person. He touched you enough that will be beaten out of you quickly. Quickly out of you. Verse 15. But you are brought down to Sheol, to the sides of the pit. Those who see you stare at you and ponder over you, saying, is this the man who made the earth tremble, who shook rains, who made the world as a wilderness and destroyed its cities, who would not open the house of his prisoners? That's a familiar little tactic. Once you go into jail, you can't come out anymore. That will destroy a society within a few years. We have seen that. Once you go to jail once, your life is over? That's not supposed to be like that. We have been so used to it by now. We say it is, and our streets are getting worse all the time. That's the ones that were let out. Not because they were let out, because of what we did to them when they were there, raping them, chastising them beyond measure, and all of that goes on in prison. And the politicians still, their whole thing is, you're tough on crime, but not your own crimes. But that's a whole other story for another day. Verse 18, all the sovereigns of the nations, all of them were laid in esteem, everyone in his own house. But you have been thrown from your burial site. Even your grave is desecrated. Like an abominable branch, like the garments of those who are killed, thrust through with a sword, who go down to the stones of the pit, like a trampled corpse, making it abundantly clear what's going to happen here. Verse 20, you are not joined with them in the burial place, for you have destroyed your land. and killed your people. Let the seed of evil doers never be mentioned. Prepare his children for slaughter because of the crookedness of their fathers, lest they rise up and possess the land and fill the face of the world with cities. This is a very veiled prophecy of the Ezekiel dry bones prophecy. Ezekiel, the 28th chapter, the 11th verse. Ezekiel, the 28th chapter, the 11th verse. The word of Yahweh Elohim came to me, saying, Son of man, lift up a lament for the king of Tyre. This is a duel. He's talking about the king of Tyre, but he's making a few slaps against Satan along the way. Say to him, thus says Yahweh Elohim, you are the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of Yahweh Elohim. Every precious stone was your covering: ruby, topaz, and diamond, beryl, onyx, and jasper, sapphire, turquoise, and emerald. Your settings and your sockets are workmanship of gold. And the day you were created, they were prepared. You were an anointed guardian cherub. I placed you on the holy mountain of Elohim Yahweh. You walked among the stones of fire. You were perfect in your ways from the day that you were created until unrighteousness was found in you. In other words, sin was found in you. 16. By the abundance of your trade, they filled you within with violence. I've said it so many times. It doesn't start with actions. It starts with your thoughts. That's where it all begins. Police your thoughts. Your actions will take care of themselves. By the abundance of your trade, they filled you within with violence. So you have sinned. So I threw you out as a profane thing from the mountain of Elohim, Yahweh. I made you vanish, guardian cherub, from among the stones of fire. Your heart was exalted because of your beauty. You corrupted your wisdom because of your splendor. I threw you down to the earth. Before kings, I set you up as a spectacle. By the multitude of your iniquities and the injustice of your trade, you profaned your sanctuaries. So I brought fire out from within you. That's where the problem started. I brought fire out from within you, and it has consumed you. I have turned you to ashes on the earth in the eyes of all who saw you. All who know you among the people will be appalled at you. You have become a horror and will be nothing. Notice this. And will be nothing forever. While these two passages are referring specifically to the kings of Babylon and Tyre, they also are references to the spiritual power behind those kings, namely Hasatan. These passages describe why Satan fell, but they do not specifically say when the fall occurred. What we do know is this: the angels were created before the earth. Remember this from last week. Job, the 38th chapter, the first verse. Job, the 38th chapter, the first verse. Then Yahweh Elohim answered Job out of the whirlwind. He said, "Who is this who darkens counsel with the words without knowledge? Now, gird up your loins like a man. I will question you, and you will inform me. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who said it? Who set it? Its dimensions, if you know. Or who stretched a line over it? On what were its foundations set? Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of Yahweh Elohim shouted for joy." And the inference here is, when Hasatan heard all of this hoopla and joyous sound in response to this perfect creation of this planet, this third rock from the sun. Well, second now that Pluto has been, well, he didn't do it. It's still the third rock from the sun, as far as I'm concerned. He was hooked. He was strung out like a rock star on hubris and attention. Satan fell before he tempted Adam and Eve in the garden. Satan's fall, therefore, must have occurred somewhere after the time the angels were created and before he tempted Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Whether Satan's fall occurred hours, days, or years before he tempted Adam and Eve in the garden, Scripture does not specifically say. And a detail of that magnitude, I can't just guess at it. But we will continue our search for clues in Genesis, the 3rd chapter, the 1st verse. Genesis, 3rd chapter, the 1st verse. And the Nakash, or you've probably got serpent, was more crafty than all the lives of the field which Yahweh Elohim had made. And he said to the woman, "Is it true that Elohim has said, 'Do not eat of every tree of the garden'?" And the woman said to the Nakash, "We are to eat of the fruit of the garden, the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, Elohim has said, 'Do not eat of it, nor touch it, lest you die.'" Where was it that he said not to touch it? Go back for a second to Genesis, the 2nd chapter, the 15th verse. Genesis, the 2nd chapter, the 15th verse. I got to point this out because this was what he used to rope her into his little trap. And Yahweh Elohim took the man and set him in the Garden of Eden to cultivate it and to keep it. And Yahweh Elohim commanded the man, saying, "From every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat from it, you shall surely die." They had not yet learned the lesson of spiritual death yet. This was for a lesson later on, when more trust was engendered and more knowledge began to form in the minds of Adam and Eve. Sometimes you want stuff before you're ready for it. But Hasatan, the Nakash, had this knowledge already, and he gave it out to confuse these neophytes. Look that word up somewhere, neophytes. It's perfect for this application. He gave it out of turn to confuse the neophytes in his presence. Go back up to Genesis, the 3rd chapter, starting at the 4th verse. And the Nakash said to the woman, "You shall certainly not die, for Elohim knows that in the day that you eat of it, your eyes shall be opened." But to what? You wouldn't have cared if you were ready for it, but you weren't ready for it yet. That's why it disturbs you so much. As you look around, everything seems different now because of this opening of your eyes. But there was a promise with that. Verse 5 again. For Elohim says that in the day that you eat of it, your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be like Elohim. That's what she wanted. Knowing good and evil. And the woman said that the tree was, that the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise, perhaps more wise than Elohim. We can take over our own lives and make them better than this. She didn't even at that point know what was coming. Better than what? That reminds me of an old jazz song. Compared to what? Compared to what? Compared to what? And the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise. And she took of its fruit and ate. And she gave also to her husband with her, and he ate. Verse 7. Then the eyes of both of them were opened. To what? And they knew that they were naked. They were already naked, but they didn't think anything bad about that then, because those thoughts weren't floating around in their heads then. And they sewed leaves, fig leaves together, and made loin coverings for themselves. The dirt was done then. Prance around naked now won't make any difference. Verse 8. And they heard the voice of Yahweh Elohim walking about in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of Yahweh Elohim among the trees of the garden. And Yahweh Elohim called out to Adam and said to him, "Where are you?" And he said, "I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked. So I hid myself." And he said, Who made you know that you were naked? The wording of that I find a little bit naked making in itself. Who made you know that you were naked? And he didn't say just who told you, but a little bit more was involved than this just telling you. Who made you know that you were naked? Have you eaten of the tree of which I commanded you that you should not eat? And the man said, "The woman who you gave to me." The woman whom you gave to me. The slightest little, this was your fault, not mine. The woman whom you gave to me, she gave me of the tree, and I ate. And Yahweh Elohim said to the woman, "What is this you have done?" And the woman said, pushing the ish down the hill, "The Nakash deceived me, and I ate." And Yahweh Elohim said to the Nakash, "Because you have done this, you are cursed more than all livestock, and more than every beast of the field. And on your belly you are to go, and eat dust all the days of your life. And I put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall crush your head, and you shall crush his heel." Footnote here. This is the first promise of the coming Messiah. This is the first promise of the coming Messiah. All the way back here. And the plan was in force before the earth came into fruition. This whole thing was planned out far ahead of now. And these people with their little viruses and such, when they want to run up on a real plan, they're going to run for the mountains and hide under the rocks. You're not going to have to hunt them down. They're going to hide under the rocks and hide themselves from the one that will eventually kill them all, because they have destroyed the earth. That's a whole other thing. I will run into some of that here, but not in detail. Verse 16. To the woman he said, I greatly increase your sorrow and your conception. Bring forth children in pain, and your desires for your husband, and he does rule over you. Making the point again. She didn't get it the first time. Verse 7. And to the man he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife implicitly over mine. And that's the problem. Not that he listened to her at all, because some guys don't listen to him at all. And this is why that's wrong. That's absolutely wrong. They both did wrong here. And to the man he said, because if you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, saying, do not eat of it, cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you are to eat of it all the days of your life. And the ground shall bring forth thorns and thistles for you. And you shall eat the plants of the field by the sweat of your face. You are to eat bread until you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. Punctuating that, for dust you are, and to dust you return. If that were not enough, in Satan's case, he then tempted his maker to sin against his own father, Yahweh Elohim. Turn to Matthew, the 4th chapter, the 1st verse. Then Yeshua was led up to the Spirit, by the Spirit, into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And after fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. And the tempter came and said to him, if you are the Son of Yahweh, command these stones to become loaves of bread. But he answered, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of Yahweh Elohim. Then the devil took him to the city, the holy city, and set him on the pinnacle of the temple, and said to him, if you are the Son of Yahweh, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone. He knew that because that was his job until he entered into this rebellion here. Verse 7, Yeshua said to him, again it is written, you shall not put Yahweh your Elohim to the test. Again the devil took him into a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. And he said to him, all these I will give you if you will fall down and worship me. That's his whole thing. Worship me. Praise. Worship. That's all he wants. And wherever he gets it, it's the same. But he will get it in the end, so to speak. Verse 11. Verse 10. Then Yeshua said to him, begone, Satan, For it is written, you shall worship Yahweh your Elohim, and him only shall you serve. And the devil left him, and behold, angels came and were ministering to him. This is not a sob story or some fairy tale where the bad guy recognizes his wrong and finally straightens up in the end. I wish it was. It would be a lot easier for all of us. He is a vicious monster and will never be anything else. In fact, he never misses a chance to do more evil. And soon, he will be bound to the earth and will no longer have access to the heavenly realms. Continuing in Revelation, the 12th chapter, the 7th verse. Revelation, the 12th chapter, the 7th verse. Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, the ancient serpent, who is called the devil and Satan, Haylel, the deceiver of the whole world. And now we have an answer, don't we, to question one. Why are things so bad down here? Whose world is it? He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. That hasn't happened yet, but it's gonna happen soon. You think things are bad now, when all of those evil angels are down here stirring up the pot more? You'll see some evil then. But we win. Remember that. No matter what you go through, we win if we stick to him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our Elohim and the authority of his Messiah have come. For the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our Elohim. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they loved not their lives even unto death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows that his time is short. And when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman who was given the two wings of the great eagle, so that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness, to the place where she is to be nourished for times and half a time. Basically, 3.5 years. Verse 15. The serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth. Symbolically, this is many people coming out of his mouth. And that is meaning that the words of his mouth fuel and direct the actions of these people. After the woman, these people came to sweep her away with a flood. Verse 16, but the earth came to the help of the woman, and the earth opened up its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured from his mouth. That means something will happen here that will somehow negate the effect of those people coming after us. 17. Then the dragon became furious, and the woman with the woman, and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring. Note carefully whom they are. On those who keep the commandments of Yahweh and hold the testimony of Yeshua Messiah. And he stood on the sand of the sea. Revelation, the 20th chapter, the first verse. And I saw an angel coming down from heaven, holding in the hand the keys to the bottomless pit and a great chain. And he seized the dragon, that ancient serpent, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years, and threw him into the pit, and shut it and sealed it over him, so that he might not deceive the nations any longer, until the 1,000 years were ended, and that he must be released for a little while. Then I saw thrones, and seated on them were those to whom the authority to judge was committed. That's some of us. And I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for the testimony of Yeshua Messiah, and for the word of Elohim Yahweh, and those who had worshiped the beast or its image, and had not received its mark on their foreheads or their hands. They came to life. What? See that again. They came to life and reigned with Messiah for 1,000 years. Verse 5. The rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were ended. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is the one who shares in the first resurrection. Over such, the second death has no power. But they will be priests of Elohim and of Messiah Yeshua, and they will reign with him for 1,000 years. And this reign of terror of Haylel, or Satan the devil, will end after the end of the second resurrection and the attendant judgment period. Revelation, the 20th chapter, the 7th verse. And when the 1,000 years are finished, Satan will be loosed out of his prison. Even the worst of the worst are loosed from time to time to check on them if they've changed any. Even the worst of the worst, Satan, is loosed for a little season. and shall come forth to deceive the nations which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to the war. How many of them are they? The number of whom is as the sand of the sea. Ever gone to the beach and counted the sand crystals? After all that's just the sand that you're picking out of your toes. That's not all the sand everywhere in the world. That's what he's speaking of here. All the sand in the world. All of them surrounding Jerusalem. Verse 9, and they went up over the breadth of the earth, and compassed the camp of the saints about, and the beloved city, not earthly Jerusalem, holy Jerusalem just above. And fire came down out of heaven and devoured all of those grains of sand, every one of them. Singed to an end. And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where were also the beast and the false prophet. And they shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. And I saw a great white throne, and him that sat upon it. For those whose face the earth and heaven fled away, and there was found no place for them. This is well ahead of the story. And this happens. Verse 12, and I saw the dead, the great and the small, standing before the throne, and books were opened. 66 of them. And another book was opened, which is the book of life, the Lamb's book of life. And the dead were judged out of the things which were written in the books, according to their works. Oh, the works do have a little bit to do with it, huh? Not as much of some have said, but the works under the 10 Commandments anyway. 13. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it. And death and Hades gave up the dead which were in them. And they were judged, every man according to their works. And death and Hades were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death, even the lake of fire. And if any was not found written in the book of life, he was cast into the lake of fire. And as a addendum of sorts and a sketch of the kind of people that are going to end up in that fire, go to Revelation 21st chapter, the 8th verse to end. Revelation 21:8. But for the fearful and unbelieving. I don't believe nothing. I don't believe nothing. I don't believe nothing you saying. Probably won't get in with that attitude. You got to believe something sometime if it's true. And abominable. I don't even have a word for that. And murderers, and not people that accidentally killed somebody. That is people that are actively and intentionally murdered people. Like somebody that shoots somebody 9 times and leaves them in the dust and walks away from them. Fornicators. Oops. Caught a few in that one. Fornicators. Anyone having sex with someone they're not married to. And I'm going to say it. Even those who got married under these new rules where you can marry a chair or a sheep or something else. Anything that you married that's not opposite of what you are, that ain't a marriage. Sorcerers. That was those who played with Ouija boards and such. Cast spells on people and such. And this is your way of life. And idolaters. Anybody heard this new language? Everything is an idolic this and idolic that and that. You don't, if you do, there's something wrong with you. But everything isn't an idol. Under this new way of speaking, everything you a little bit like is supposed to be an idol to you. For review, but for the fearful and unbelieving and abominable and murderers and fornicators and sorcerers and idolaters, and the big one, all liars. And that's not somebody that told a lie once and repented of it. But that's the ones that lie all day, every day, all the time. And you one at them and that's not the truth. Yes, it is. All liars. Their part shall be in the lake that burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. And after all of this, at Elohim's time, Hasatan will die also. Any questions? Comments?
I do have a comment. You state that there's going to be peace on earth for 1,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then after those 1,000 years, Father is going to loose Satan again.
Mm-hmm.
My dismay in that is we've already had to endure his evil throughout our generation for 6,000 years already. We've had to endure all of this evil from Satan in the 6,000 years. And then we're finally going to get 1,000 years of peace. Again, my dismay is, since the Father already knows what we don't know, why is he going to let our generations beyond us, after 1,000 years, go through the same mess that we've endured before we got there?
Well, it won't be the same mess,
Okay,
number one.
okay.
And we have to know how many among us will secretly be pining for someone else to come along
So
at
we'll be
that point.
stronger.
No, we will be weaker. We will be weaker. And he comes along and this quickly amasses more people to his side than our sands of the sea.
Right.
Something went wrong. Not with him or his plan, with us.
So he's just going to, so we have to, our generations.
No, this was going to be 3 days or so. That's all.
Oh,
That's all.
okay.
Ruby.
Okay. But excuse me, I just have just a little, I'm sorry, just a little misunderstanding. You're saying after the 1,000 years that he's loosed again, only 3 days will pass before everything goes back to peace?
Once he knows who's who, and this army of massive people has gone to Jerusalem to kill these anointed people, and he will kill them once they assemble. It takes a little time to assemble that many people. Whatever time that is, you got to wait until that time, because all of them will be vanquished by fire from his mouth from at that time.
I think I can help you on that. I'll try to put it in different terms. So after, because remember, the second resurrection, that's for the people who have risen in the second resurrection.
Right.
They're going to be amongst they're going to be the ones who are human form, and we will be spirit form. We will be teaching them under the Father's leadership how this world is supposed to be. There will be peace. There will be perfect political environment, because he will be our leader instead of us having kings and queens or whatever. So these people who have risen in the second resurrection will know how God intended, or how Yahweh intended for this world to be for 1,000 years.
Because they didn't know. Because they
didn't know, exactly. They didn't know. So they're finally going to experience who he is, how this world is supposed to be for 1,000 years. But here's the thing. They're going to be learning. Okay? They're going to be learning. And some people are still going to miss, well, I still miss what I did before.
And some people are still going to be blinded.
Exactly. Even though they're going to be living in a perfect society. So that's why, again, now the Father has to weed out all these people from the second resurrection, because they didn't know him first. That's why they were in the first resurrection. So now he's going to weed out again. So that's why he loosed Satan. And now he's going to see who is Satan going to influence now. Even though they've experienced a perfect government, who still wants to follow him? And trust me, there are going to be thousands and thousands that, even though they have experienced a perfect world, will still follow him. And then he will vanquish them with fire. Because it's like, I've given you a perfect world, so I still have to weed. He still has to weed out through the people in the second resurrection. That's why he has to be loosed again. Because he has to, again, check and see who's really going to follow me. Now, they're going to have it a bit easier than we had it, because we had to follow him.
Because we're coming back in the world of total peace.
So we will be spirit form, we will be teaching those in the second resurrection who did not know when they lived the first time.
So they're still living in their old ways.
Exactly. They'll be learning, but it's like, well, I miss, when I used to worship Molech. I miss when I used to worship this person. Well, I miss having sex with her. I miss it. They will be in a perfect environment, but they're not going to completely love it. So he's got to weed them out again by letting Satan loose for a little while, seeing who will follow him again, and then those people will be vanquished.
Okay.
And then Satan will also be vanquished with his demons.
And the thing is, as we saw there, after that little time, he's going to come on the scene and amass more people to his side than there are sands on the beaches on all of the seas in the world.
Yes, a lot of people.
And that's a lot of people.
Yes, it is. Okay, thank you.
So our thing is to get into the first resurrection, so we don't have to
Right.
go through this again.
Right.
Mhm.
Go through this again. We have to keep the Sabbath all our lives and do this all over again.
But even though we're living in peace, and
No,
we
no,
know
I'm saying-
we know the law, we still have to go through it again with them, correct? Or
No,
No.
we'll be spirit beings.
We'll be spirit.
They will be flesh. We won't have to do this flesh thing again. We'll be spirit beings, but we will be teaching those
So
in the
we'll be
flesh.
teaching and watching this
We
mayhem.
will be
Yeah.
under the leadership.
Guess what? Only 144,000.
It's gonna get there.
Mhm.
Get there. Okay.
Ruby.
So I guess that goes to say for those who follow his
So he said
commandments, his
only
word, or like we
144,000.
obey.
That's not a lot.
That's not a lot out of billions of people.
That's not a lot of people.
That's not a lot out of billions. Not at all.
And even your Sabbath keeper and holy day keepers and all of that.
And it's all the people who have lived during all of these years. Are we talking about people all these thousands of years? 144,000.
That's not a whole lot.
It's still not a lot.
It's not a lot.
144,000. That's not a lot. That's a
That's
very.
He says it's straight and it's narrow.
That's very
Road
nice.
is wide.
Okay.
Sister Sandy made a point
If both
regarding,
of us are all in self-resurrection, doing this all over again, we screwed up.
Yeah, that's
and
yeah.
you know what, Sister Sandy, you made a valid point. For those even who kept the holy days and the
Yes,
Sabbath and whatnot,
you know,
because
yeah.
we have people that we hear, they retired. Who retires from the Lord, really? Who really says, I retired and I'm gonna do my own thing now? You don't retire, you made a commitment. The day you went into that water, rose up, that is our commitment. We can't say, well, you know, I took care of my sheep, that's it.
Yeah.
They're on their own.
Well, because we're not perfect.
Right. But really, who really says something like that? Something that's really done.
I've heard a lot.
Vanessa, when you're saying, well, what are you gonna do?
I've heard it a lot.
And again, it's like when kids are growing up with privilege. They got everything they want. Everything's perfect. They have a roof over their head, they got food on the table, they have a job, they have school, they have all this stuff, but they still don't rebel. So that's what's gonna happen again. So he's gotta weed out who's gonna sin, even though I've given you everything,
Yeah.
who's gonna be a prodigal.
It's like a weeds and a tear.
Exactly.
It's like a
So
weeds.
that's why he's gonna be loose for a little while. Exactly.
Okay. I
144,000,
got you.
that ain't a big number. No, it's
Not
not.
out of billions of people.
So we're in training now. We that are here in training now, who are you gonna serve?
Yeah.
Who are you
They're
gonna
the same
serve?
one. They're the same one. Okay, thank you. I got it understanding now.
I have a comment. I think that's so, like, so deep that we have these mega churches, these Sunday mega churches,
Mhm.
and no one's talking about this 144,000.
No.
And we got 144,000
Sitting in all
sitting
this.
on these mega churches.
Right.
That should show you right there that if you are in this huge flood of people, and it says there's 144,000, you're not in the right crew. Because it's too big. You're not gonna,
big.
if you look to your left, you look to your right. you're probably
Everybody,
not gonna see
everybody
some
ain't
of
doing
your
the right
friends.
thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. That should be,
They
should
know
be a
nothing
clue
about it.
that maybe I'm not in the right spot.
Well, they don't know. They're not being taught that they're not in the right spot. Okay.
Thurman?
I just want to interject that out of the tribulation, there's going to be a greater number of the multitude saved too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in addition to the 144,000, it's not just 144,000.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time? I could not hear you.
Yeah, out of the tribulation, there will be a great innumerable multitude saved.
Yes.
So it's not just the 144,000.
We'll be teaching.
Okay.
That 144,000 is those who will be, along with those 2 witnesses in Israel, teaching the rest of the world before the first resurrection. Anything else? That's it for me.